Quick warning, this episode does cover some very disturbing and violent material, so viewer and listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to Wyrd Wessex, the podcast for all things supernatural, folklore, referred to by one YouTuber recently as boring. My name's Andy.
And my name's Craig.
What are we going to be talking about today, Craig?
Today we're going to be covering one of our favourite people.
Don't know if I'd call him my favourite person, but all right.
Okay, well, he's my favourite, all right? Is that...
Suit yourself. It's a bit weird.
So our story starts in Handsworth, a suburb of Sheffield in South Yorkshire in England. Born in 1959, the son of a welder. Now, a childhood accident actually left him unable to pursue his dream of playing professional football. So instead, a turn towards art school sparked his interest in acting.
Craig, are you talking about the actor Sean Bean?
Yeah. Is that... You said to me we were going to do an episode on Sean Bean?
Sawney Bean. Sawney Bean.
So, are they... They're similar?
A little bit different, quite different.
Is it still Yorkshire?
Further north, really. Not even in Wessex, definitely further north than Yorkshire.
So North Wessex again, right?
North Wessex. Try Scotland.
Oh, well, I'm going to have to ditch my notes. Can I borrow yours?
Yeah, I'll send you mine. The Legend of Sawney Bean, Sawney, or The Highlands Have Eyes, or The Scottish Cannibals. On a desolate stretch of the Scottish coast in the 16th century, a group of well-armed men and their hounds stepped through a cave's mouth and straight into hell. Before them was a butcher's yard. Scraped and gnawed bones lay in piles, some still with half-eaten meat clinging to them. More meat had been salted and was smoking over small fires, or in pickling in old clay and glass jars. A young soldier who had barely grown his first beard stepped forward, holding high his torch, only to trip on something. Bringing the light to bear, he immediately emptied his stomach's contents onto the cave floor. The meat he had tripped on was a human arm, blackened by fire as if roasted, bearing the gnaw marks of small sets of teeth. For this was no ordinary abattoir. It was the home of Sawney Bean, possibly the worst cannibal ever to have lived.
Yeah, definitely a bit like Sean Bean. Similar backstory.
I mean, I guess he dies in the end.
What we need to do is get a version of this story, with Sean Bean playing Sawney Bean.
Absolutely. I'm surprised it hasn't happened already.
Let's make it happen.
As I'm also, sure Sean Bean is one of our listeners, so, make it happen.
Yeah. Sean, if you're listening. Copyright Wyrd Wessex.
So, born in the mid-1500s somewhere in East Lothian, Alexander Bean was one of several siblings. Now, legend states that he came from a labouring family, hard-working, salt-of-the-earth types that scratched a living during a time of political, religious and cultural change in Scotland. Sawney, a name he apparently used instead of Alexander, soon realised as a teenager he wasn't really fit for the work, or more accurately, that the work wasn't fit for him. He'd been described as idle and work-shy, unwilling to put in the hard graft asked of him. Realising stealing to a lot less work for much greater yield, Sawney had found his calling. He had developed something of a reputation as a violent tearaway, robbing several people as well as stealing from houses and stalls from the local market. One day he was out browsing the stalls and found something that drew his eye, something he knew he simply must have, something he could not live without.
It's interesting because that's about as far as I've read, so I don't actually know what happens.
Oh, fucking hell.
It's exciting, isn't it? Agnes Douglas, or otherwise known as Black Agnes, reputed to be a vicious, spiteful woman, even at a young age. It said she had previously been accused of witchcraft by some folk in her village. While she was a young woman, her temper and the rumours of black magic put most people off of associating with her, let alone marrying her, but she was the perfect match for Sawney. Agnes and Sawney were wed, and she soon joined her husband in his life of crime, and their activities grew bolder. It was only a matter of time before they took their robberies a step further, committing murder.
Murder.
There's been a murder. Now, the Scottish countryside back then was something of a lawless place. This was a time when border reivers were still raiding one another, burning houses and keeps, and settling personal feuds, and highway robbery was rife. However, most of the time, even the roughest bandit will spare their victim if they willingly part with their money. Agnes and Sawney were different. They had no interest in sparing their victims and would beat and often kill them. The countryside was a big place, and without modern technologies, bodies often weren't found.
So we can only imagine how they took their victims. Perhaps they leapt from the bushes as their prey passed by, but as a husband and wife duo, they most likely would have used Agnes as bait. A lone traveller spots a distressed woman on the road, sobbing or perhaps injured. He stops, maybe feeling like the heroic saviour of the day, or maybe just to move the woman out of his way. As he did so, she would seize onto him, plunging the knife hidden beneath her skirts into him as the heavy weight of Sawney came crashing down onto him from behind. Whatever their method, soon the people of West Lothian began to fear leaving their towns and villages. This left them with another problem, however. They were gaining riches, running out of places to spend it though. When a community is cut off by fear of an unknown danger, folk get mighty suspicious. Any outsider will be treated with hostility, suspicion, or worse. The pair found soon that going into towns to buy food, drink and lodgings was just too dangerous, and so they began to grow hungry. Sawney would not see he and his wife remain hungry for long though. The next victim that they slew, they would not be needing to drag the body off to hide in some bog or thicket of trees. They butchered, cooked, and ate the unfortunate soul. Some people resort to cannibalism out of desperation, some out of a morbid curiosity. While the pair may have eaten human flesh because of the former, they apparently developed a taste for it, because they would do so again and again. It became the staple of their diet, but still no one knew what was going on. There was now even less evidence of their work. People were going missing, but the true horror of it all was a long way off coming to light.
So things were looking up for Sawney. He had his wife, he'd finally found a line of work he excelled at, and now, more often than not, a full belly. Agnes's belly was full as well, growing rounder by the day in fact, and soon the pair realised they would need somewhere to stay for the longer term. And so, wandering far and only stopping near villages for a light snack, they found themselves making for the coast. They arrived at the Firth of Clyde. There, close to the town of Girvan and Ballantrae Bay, they found it. A cave, dark, damp and foreboding, cut off by the tide twice a day. Any sane person wouldn't think of living in such a place, but that was not exactly the concern of the pair. It was perfect for them. As far as lairs went, it suited their every need, defensible, remote and safe. Sawney Bean and Black Agnes had a new hunting ground, and in a few short months, another hungry mouth to feed. And so they set about turning their cannibal lair into a cannibal home.
Girvan was a fishing port not too far from the cave, and that was the largest town in the immediate area at the time, surrounded by farms and small villages. When people started going missing, it was of concern at first, but again, not that unusual. Travel could be treacherous, and sometimes people just decided for one reason or another not to return. Eventually, however, as the years went by, this did become a concern, to such an extent that rumours of wild beasts once more flared up, something taking travellers in the night. There was nothing to connect these disappearances to those years before in East Lothian. But fear travels fast. People were afraid to travel at night. Most people either personally knew someone had gone missing or at least knew of them. And what's more, rumours flew of body parts scorched by flame with chunks missing from them had been found washed ashore all along the Firth. One or two could be passed off as a fire aboard a vessel, perhaps the dead being feasted upon by sea creatures. However, they were too numerous and the cuts were too neat. Eventually, local magistrates dealing with the dip in trade and the worried population took their concerns to the heart of Scottish power, and the king heard of it.
King James VI of Scotland, and later the James I of England, was a superstitious man. He believed in ghosts and was sure demons stalked the land, consorting with witches. And we can only imagine what he would have made of these rumours. So he began sending agents out into the Scottish countryside looking for whoever or whatever was committing these vile acts. But for all their searching, they came back empty-handed, having looked in the wrong places. A few may have looked in the right places, but they did not return at all. 2 decades passed, and people were still vanishing, although over a wider area than before. Those attacks took on a different form. It wasn't just the odd lone traveller anymore, for most would not dare venture out alone. It was small groups of 3 or 4, sometimes more than, left one town and never turned up at the next.
As we described the pair's early attacks, these would have indeed taken on a different form. A merchant looking to leave an inn would wait for 2 or more others heading the same way before risking the journey. Together they would travel, being sure to keep an eye out for any dangers, with someone on watch over their camp at night. They would have perhaps felt eyes upon them in the bushes and trees, but maybe chalked it up to the fear, and just fear alone. Then they would see something ahead, and their heart would leap in their throat. It was a child. 2 children playing. Odd, surely, given their remote location, but hardly a monster looking to carry them off. They might call out to them, tell them to get out of the way, or ask where their parents were, but then they would notice more children, 5 or 6-year-olds to teenagers, all grubby-faced, torn clothes and bright, hungry eyes. Too late would they notice themselves surrounded. Adults now too, blades glinting in the moonlight, as over a score descended on them, eager for the feast of their flesh. The problem was impossible to ignore now. And more agents of the king were sent out. However, they were sent to the wrong places with disastrous consequences. You see, you cannot simply wait outside the bounds of a town each time you want to eat if you're in the position of Sawney and Agnes. It would attract too much attention, be too risky, and you could easily find yourselves outnumbered. And so, it was between the small villages with only a few dozen inhabitants and an inn or 2 that they waited. Perhaps 1 or 2 would be sent close to spy on the place, watching the inns and waiting for a group to leave. And so when it came to all of these missing travellers, one thing connected them all. The last people to see them alive were more than often than not the innkeepers. And so the story goes, across the area, innocent men and women were beaten, even killed. All it took was perhaps an item of clothing or a personal belonging left by one of the victims accidentally in their haste to get on the road, and the finger of blame would be pointed squarely at the innkeeper. Sometimes it was overzealous lawmen who tortured confessions out of them, hanging them and reporting back that the matter was dealt with, only for another group of travellers to vanish a short while later. Other times it was just the townsfolk themselves giving over to mob justice. But whatever they did, whoever they hanged, the disappearances continued.
Hang on a minute. So, rewind a little. How many cannibals are there now?
A lot.
So they had lots of children?
No, they had some sons and daughters, and there are grandchildren at this point as well.
So did they meet anyone else or take prisoners back to the cave, or?
Nope.
So they kept it in the family. Okay. So, back at Cannibal HQ, the Bean clan were doing a brilliant job of keeping themselves hidden. Not only was the cave hard to reach, but anything of the victims that they dragged back that weren't eaten or preserved, they discarded into the sea when the tide was in. The currents washed the remains away and deposited them up and down the coast, which made it very hard for the authorities to pinpoint where the crimes were taking place, although search parties were beginning to look for the missing victims and those responsible. One such search party took note of the cave, but decided it wasn't fit for habitation, so decided against looking inside. While perhaps their decision allowed the Bean clan to commit more atrocities, it also may have saved their lives. Sawney, Agnes and their demonic flock had quite a good system going. They weren't even robbing people for the valuables anymore, for they didn't really have anywhere to go and spend the loot. So they were raiding for food and perhaps the thrill of the hunt, attacking small groups now, rather than just solitary travellers. But even for a clan as big and hungry as the Bean family, a group of 4 or 5 travellers is a lot of meat. And so they set about building up their stores.
After killing a small party, the first thing they would do is drag their victims back to their lair. They were raiding quite far out now, and while they still centred their killings around Girvan, sometimes it would be a day or 2 from the cave where they made their attacks. Once there, the victims would be butchered and the best cuts would be cooked there and then, and the clan would feast. The rest they would either pickle, salt, dry and smoke in racks over the fire to provide sustenance for months to come. This may be why the group were able to operate for so long. After a dozen or so travellers were snatched and no meat wasted, the family could have survived for months without making another kill. But however well they had it, it would all come to an end.
It was a big market day in Girvan, one of several held throughout the year. When smaller towns held markets, they would also hold fairs, which would attract people from miles around, and even with the alarming disappearances, many would have still travelled to attend. For a lot of people, fairs such as these would not just provide a chance to shop or trade, but to meet people, enjoy entertainment, music, and dancing. A young couple engaged to be wed left in the early hours of the evening, both on horseback, eager to reach one of the inns in the surrounding villages. It was in the trees on the outskirts of the town that they were accosted. Perhaps, as mentioned before, a young child stood in the road asking for help, or a worried-looking woman needed assistance. Whatever the ruse, the pair stopped and were soon surrounded by the Bean clan, their knives sharp and eyes full of murderous hunger. The poor bride-to-be was dragged from her horse first, enveloped by a horde of the cannibals. However, the young man was not just an unfortunate traveller to be surprised and overrun by the Bean clan. He was a cavalry officer, and he was not about to give up his life easily, nor was he ready to abandon his fiancée. Producing a pistol, he fired a shot into one of the attackers, wounding them. Then, from beneath his cloak, he drew his cavalry sabre, setting about him with great slashing cuts in an attempt to reach his lady. Freeing himself from the throng, he desperately fought his way towards her, badly cutting several more of the assailants.
Perhaps the clan were unused to their prey fighting back so vigorously, or perhaps it was the noise of the townsfolk at the edge of the fair, roused by the gunshot, who were rushing towards the trees. But Sawney and his family did not stick around to collect their grisly prize, but instead turned and ran. Unfortunately for the poor woman, it was too late. She died there and then. But as terrifying and tragic as the ordeal was, the people of Gurvan finally had faces to the horror that had been stalking their lands for decades. A message was sent at once to the authorities, and soon a hunting party formed, bigger than any that had gone out before. With them were bloodhounds, apparently sent from the king himself. In some stories, the king himself actually joined the party, but I've got my doubts on this. Due to the heroic actions of the officer, those dogs had a clear trail to follow, a trail of blood, and this led them straight to Sawney's lair. They watched the cave's mouth, waiting for the tide to retreat after being informed of its whereabouts by a local. Stealing their nerve, the group entered with guns and swords ready. Before them was a scene of nightmare. Body parts littered the floor, bones, flensed dry, flesh lay in heaps, jars of pickled human flesh piled high in corners, and several smoky fires did the work of curing the rest of the meat taken from their victims. Within the cave were 48 people. Sawney, Agnes, near a dozen sons and daughters, and the rest were grandchildren, all produced by incest.
Here the tale diverges. One version of the story states that after seeing inside and fighting a small skirmish with the clan, are pushed back out again. Rather than delving once more into the hellish realm of Sawney and his family, the authorities used powder to blast the entrances, sealing the family off and suffocating them. However, most versions agree that with an overwhelming force, the party entered the cave, and witnessing the horror for themselves, they arrested each man, woman, and child in the clan, dragging them out before sealing off the cave mouth with powder. The clan were taken to Edinburgh in chains, some say to the old Tolbooth jail. They were given no trial, as they were deemed animals rather than men. Men were separated from the women and children.
Again here the tale has two versions. In the first they're hanged, drawn and quartered, then finally burned, a punishment usually reserved to treason, and one that was going out of fashion at that time. However, a more grisly account tends to be the more enduring. The men were led to a platform beside a great fire and stripped naked. There they were bound and had their genitals cut off, which were cast into the fire before their very eyes. Afterwards they lost their hands and their feet. Then they were left to bleed to death in full view of the women and children of their family. As they bled their last, the remaining women and children were then tied to stakes and burned, Black Agnes last of all. And over the screams and wails, one voice carried above them all. It was that of Sawney Bean himself, shouting his last defiant words. "It's not over! It will never be over!"
Yeah, it is.
See, just like Sean Bean, he dies in the end.
Wow, yes. I think maybe we should have done Sean Bean. That was fucking grisly, man.
It was, wasn't it? So
I was on for the ride there because I hadn't read that.
If he did exist, so this is the debate whether he existed. But I will add, apparently there was one daughter that escaped the massacre. Some say she escaped close to it. Some say that she fled and didn't like her family's lifestyle early on. One is that someone took pity on her and fostered her because she was so small. But those legends tend to agree at some point. Some say when she was 12, some say when she'd married and was living in a close by town, she fell to the family curse and started eating people. Maybe it had been, sort of, it was within her, kind of psyche at that point.
Yeah.
Said there's a few different tales. Another simply just says that it was discovered who she was and who her parents were and who her grandparents were. And either way, the tales do come together at the end and agree that she was killed by the townsfolk of Girvan. Now,
Wow.
one little last dark bit, but we've had a discussion about this before, and there is a lot of evidence to say, well, I say a lot of evidence, there's a lack of evidence, should I say, to Sawney's tale. There is a good chance that this was just anti-Jacobite propaganda that's come from England.
I hear you're racist now, father.
So there is a publication that came about in the 1800s, I think, called the Newgate, or the 17 and 1800s, called the Newgate Calendar, and it was all like a big catalogue of sensationalized sort of crime and punishments that came from that was all connected with Newgate Prison, and
Yeah.
they would occasionally do their own version of weird news, I guess, where they'd tell tales from across the UK, and to my knowledge, the first reference to Sawney Bean comes from there. And if it's the 1700s, that is kind of a time when that, real racism, for like, what it is against the
Yeah.
Scots is really in full force.
Interesting.
There are other instances of cannibalism in the Highlands, though, that they think it might have been based on. There is a character called Christy Cleek, and for some reason, it's deleted from my notes, so I'm going to pull up a page. But the name of this Christy Cleek was actually a butcher from Scotland in the 1300s. Now, in the 1300s in Scotland, due to the effects of the Black Death and the wars with England and several other things, there was a lot of famine. And the story goes that this Christy Cleek was with a band of outlaws, ne'er-do-wells, trying to scratch a living out in the wilds. And eventually they came to the point where one of their members died of starvation. And Christy Cleek declared that he'd put his skills to work and butchered this person and fed the rest of the group. They then go on to start eating travellers, and much like Sawney Bean, but on a lesser scale. Now, I don't think I mentioned it in there, but the death toll attributed to Sawney Bean is somewhere between 1 and 5,000 deaths over the
Whoa.
course of a few decades. And if there is
That's
any
still a
truth to it,
lot.
that is a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it though, you're feeding a clan of like, sort of near 50 people.
Yeah. I don't know if you'd get away with it for that long, though. I mean, that's.
It is a lot. I
Hmm.
think it would be, if there is truth to it, I think it's probably going to be in the realm of, sort of a few hundred maybe. You know, I don't know, it's like so many of these stories. I like the story, as horrible as it is, but I think that, a heavy pinch of salt, enough to salt and cure a, I don't know, human thigh or something like that, maybe. Um, but it did give us The Hills Have Eyes, that was directly based on the Legend of Sawney Bean.
Was it really? I've never
It
seen
was.
it.
It's worth a watch. It's worth a watch, even for that fella with the cool stare. The actor whose name I forget with the cool eyes. Um, it's worth a watch.
Wow. Yeah.
So, what's your take on it? Do you think it's real? Do you think it happened? Do you think it's based on anything, or do you think it's all anti-Scottish propaganda?
Oh, putting me on the spot there. I don't know, really. I mean, it is a good bit of folklore, isn't it?
It is.
And like anything, there's probably a pinch of something in there, like you said, like there's possible other people that it might have been. So I think maybe, the numbers are probably exaggerated. I think that's a bit far-fetched.
I want to know where the last line came from. I need to look up. I haven't actually read the article from the Newgate publication, but I don't know how old that. It's not over. It will never be over. I don't know where
Do
that.
do we have any other references to like Black Agnes? Because you said about her being a witch.
There's a few references to a Black Agnes, and I'm wondering if it's one of these things like kind of Lancelot and Merlin were added to Arthur's tale.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's a similar thing where they just like, oh yeah, she was horrible, he's horrible. Clearly they got together, and they just kind of supplanted someone else with it. Because that happens a lot. People, you find it in the sagas, the Norse sagas. People just throw other
Yeah.
famous names in there to like basically give it some clout. I think Black Agnes might have been, but you do see references to a Black Agnes several places throughout Scottish folklore and sort of, well, vague histories.
Yeah.
But yeah, just the idea of his last words as being, sort of basically mutilated to death, being it's not over, it will never be over. I mean, they're as villainous last words go, they're pretty good.
Yeah, I've got it as Sean Bean reading that though. So
You've got to do an impression now, man.
making notes for my script. Make a whole TV series.
My favourite Sean Bean folklore, because I feel like I should throw you a bone here and like give you a bit of Sean Bean folklore.
We'll keep the notes. I'll use them for another one at some
We'll
point.
do a Sean Bean episode, but my
Yeah.
favourite one is the reason he dies and everything is the universe trying to make up for the fact that his name should rhyme but doesn't.
Yes, sure.
I could buy that. I could buy that. But yeah, so that is the legend of Sawney, not Sean Bean, I think.
Yeah, no, good work on the script. It was good.
Thank you. If you
B
guys
plus
listening or watching have any thoughts on it, if you think he was real, if you think it's anti-Scottish propaganda, if you think it's Sean Bean putting on a Scottish accent, he does die in the end, as we said. Let us know in the comments. But yeah, I like it. It's one of my favourite horrible bits of folklore.
So we've had a listener email. I think I mentioned on the last Ghost Animals episode that someone was going to send us a story. We were hoping it would come in before we did that, but it didn't. So I'm going to just put it in here if that's all right. So I'm going to read this verbatim, which is, hi, Craig. So I reckon it was the mid-90s and we were camping with my granddad, mum, my uncles and aunt, me and my sister. This was in Bedfordshire. It says, we'll keep the exact location quiet as it's privately owned and I reckon the owners wouldn't want the attention. My granddad was sat at the tents with my mum and we were in the field on the hill next to where we had the tent set up. It was dark, but the moon was very bright, a hot summer's evening, probably around 10ish, maybe later. We were walking back to the tents when we heard thundering hooves galloping towards us. Thinking it was one of our ponies, we all stopped to look. Thinking, how had one of them got into that field? A black horse about 16 hands high galloped to us and stopped, snorted, and stood there right next to us all, its mane long and flowing. It was muscly and looked almost a navy velvet colour with the moonlight reflecting upon its coat. It was not one of our ponies, that's for sure. We all stood in surprise, gazing upon it. It was the most beautiful, magical horse we had seen. And apparently one running wild, we thought. It had jumped into the field we were in. But here's the odd thing. Just as suddenly as it appeared, it turned quickly and started to gallop off and vanished into the air. We could hear the hooves, but it could not be seen. We all, every one of us, screamed and ran back to Grandad and Mum, absolutely adamant we had seen a ghost horse. But where had it gone? We could see far as the moon lit the whole sky, and it was apparent it had simply been of another world. We all remember this the same, but oddly, my sister, who was only 4, remembers it to have a ghostly rider on its back. She's the only one of us who remembers the rider. I only recall vividly the black horse. My mum remembers us telling her what we saw when we ran up screaming about a ghost horse. The land we once owned had belonged to the Templars. 15 minutes walk away was once a castle. A highwayman once roamed, and people have also seen him in spirit. A load of other ghost stories of the same village exists. My sister saw fairies here, and my mum one of our old ponies too after it passed. I believe the veil is very thin here. We had countless experiences growing up there. I had a near death experience which completely changed me and have many paranormal experiences. And to me, it's all quite normal. But this is the first time I had that I remember firm evidence of a world that we cannot see. And that comes in from Anna.
First of all, Anna, you are a natural storyteller. It's good. That was very good. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, I knew the Templars owned land in Bedfordshire. They sort of went Hertfordshire as well, all around there. That's cool. And they do say, so the folklore goes, that the younger you are, the more susceptible you are to those sort of things. So maybe that's why the youngest
Yeah.
saw the rider where the others didn't.
We do tend to lose the ability. Maybe it disappears gradually and the rider disappears
Yeah.
first. And then you just get like the legs at the end.
Yeah, just these little hooves going on. What the fuck's that? I mean, as I said, I've had two experiences in my life that I could have, could pass off as ghosts. I could also pass them off as an overactive kid's imagination. But it's interesting. Both of those things was like, no, I saw something. Was when I was quite young. Yeah, one I was so young I can't even remember it, but apparently I explained it in vivid detail. The other one I can remember, but it does tend to happen to the young a bit more. It's like that freaky thing where you see the cat just like watch something walk across, and you're
Yeah.
like, "What the fuck are you looking at?" It's
I'm sure I won't have to go into it in detail, but I've mentioned Ocean's experiences before with like the
yes,
man with the hat on and stuff. Like, yeah,
yeah.
there's stuff happens.
Maybe it's
Weird.
kids. Kids are just creepy.
Yeah. So the message of tonight's episode is if you haven't had kids yet, don't.
They're scary things. Yeah, I think it was like creepy pat, not creepy pasta, but like a Reddit sort of messed up stories thing, and someone was this kid was describing this dude standing right behind his dad as his dad was asking what was wrong, and like that's freaky, that's going to unsettle you.
Yeah. Yeah. So if anyone else has any stories, do send them in because we will read them out.
Please do. I might have a guest or two, or at least a guest and someone else sending their stories in if they don't want to come on themselves. So hopefully that'll be in the next few episodes. So, have we got any weird news for the end of the episode?
No.
All right, stay weird.
Oh, wait. No, I just found something.
Oh, good, good.
So the headline is I live with a haunted doll possessed by a woman who was killed by her husband.
Strong start.
Yeah. Billy's green eyes are framed by fluttering lashes while brown ringlets hang down her porcelain face. She's cradling a baby in her arms as she stares right at me through my laptop screen. She has a tragic tale, I'm told. Fiercely intelligent, she owned a florist in a small town, but behind closed doors was married to a violent, abusive man. Billy longed to be a mother, so when she discovered she was pregnant, she vowed to keep it from her husband and leave him to raise the baby alone. Tragically, though, he found a positive test in the bin and brutally murdered his wife by stabbing her in the back as she sat on her sofa. Probably good job you didn't go first.
Happy stories.
Should have read it first. Today, Billy resides in the body of a doll and is listed on Etsy for £377.36.
Buy it. Buy it.
She'll treat you like a loving family member, reads the description below her picture. If someone is abusing you, she'll ruin their life and make them regret the day they ever hurt you. It says, type haunted dolls into the internet and pages of Etsy results pop up. Each has a tale as dramatic as Billy's and is searching for a new home. There's online communities of people who adopt these dolls too. Facebook groups such as Haunted Dolls and Oddities and doll subreddits in paranormal forums. I know what I'm subscribing to tonight.
Hell. Buy one.
I love a weird internet rabbit hole, so I'm intrigued, especially as I have a doll that I found at an antiques fair in 2015, which used to sit on a shelf in my spare room. Whenever my friend slept over, she'd plead, "Get that thing out of this room." I guess my doll has a certain energy, so I decide to dip a toe into the haunted doll community to see if she is just creepy or actually possesses the spirit of a dead person. So, according to their owners, these dolls become vessels for the spirits of people who have died. Sometimes that person has unresolved problems or passed away in tragic or unexpected circumstances, like Billy, who found a resting place in the form of a doll who's a mother cradling a tiny baby. Another doll called Annabelle belongs to psychic medium Deborah Davis. I think we talked about Deborah on
I
a
did, yes.
Wextra, maybe.
I think so.
It was creepy. They all are.
They
Um,
all
yeah. Haunted dolls are possessed by earthbound souls. Sometimes you may have a spirit that just love the doll, so they visit it regularly. These are benign hauntings, meaning it's going to proceed through the serious stages that become an active poltergeist. But there's a dark side, though, she adds. Worst case scenario, they're taken over by demons. Regardless, Deborah says she wouldn't recommend buying a haunted doll unless you're an experienced medium. They can literally turn your life upside down without you even realizing it's the doll that's responsible, she tells me. I've just realized how long this goes on for.
If I bought a haunted doll, like
Hmm.
meaning to buy a haunted doll, like Googling haunted doll and buying one, looking through all the horrible stories and buying one, and then my life went to shit, I think I'd realize it was the doll.
Do you think?
I think I'd have my suspicions, yeah.
Okay, so this goes into various versions of people that have dolls and then the
You know what?
history of haunted dolls.
Fuck it. Don't read it. We'll do an episode on haunted dolls.
I mean, this is a script right here.
There you go.
I'm just trying to see if it ties up to the original headline at any point.
As you can see, we research our subjects thoroughly before.
No, I look for headlines. Um, It just ends with since I joined the haunted doll community, I began to call mine Florence, and I totally get the allure of this group. When Miranda tells me my dolls are family and the spirits help me feel less alone in the world, her words resonate with me. I don't know if I'll end up finding anything else out about Florence, but I have moved her into a new home in the living room. I like seeing her in the evening as I watch telly on the sofa. We're together, and I'll be there if, or indeed when, she decides to communicate with me.
That's horrible. There is something. I mean, I've said it so many times. There is something creepy about dolls. One that is.
Yeah.
It's just. Um,
If anyone hasn't worked out from our nearly, 9 months of doing this now, weird news is just we find a headline we like and then we read what it says. We
that's it.
don't pre-read. Come on.
Like this one is in a very annoying format. This one, so I'm going to read it as best I can. My one is not
Not
about
like your script.
mine is not about um mine is not about haunted dolls or murders. It is aliens from the
Is
Daily
it from the
Mail.
Daily Mail?
No, it's not. It's from Business Today. Strongest sign of aliens. James Webb telescope discovers an exoplanet with gases produced by living beings on Earth. Scientists suggest otherwise. Discovery of DMS gas. The James Webb telescope has reportedly detected dimethyl sulfide (DMS) gas in the atmosphere of exoplanet K2-18b. What was that? LB226? No, that's the one from Aliens. Located 124 light years away. This gas is considered a strong indicator of potential life due to its exclusive production by living organisms on Earth. Gas identified on Earth primarily from marine phytoplankton. It has no known abiotic sources, making its presence on K2, it keeps changing the page, 18b, a significant finding in the search for extraterrestrial life. However, scientists are skeptic and believe it is just methane gas. Well, this is a bit of a no-starter. Launched by NASA, it talks a little bit about the James Webb Telescope, which is cool.
Sorry, did you criticize me for not pre-reading my article only to tell me that you
Neither of
haven't
us
pre-read?
reread these things. While initial data suggests the presence of the gas with more than 50%.
Can we rechange this segment from weird news to clickbait?
Yes. um, so yeah, apparently it's suggests the presence of the gas with more than 50% confidence. Researchers emphasise the need for further investigation to confirm the findings, establishing conclusive evidence of extraterrestrial life. But apparently this is something, and this is me reading off script now, well, off page, that is something they've been talking about quite recently, is like trying to focus on these gases on different planets. There is a astrophysicist from Cambridge. He underscores the preliminary nature of the findings, highlighting the ongoing scientific quest to unravel the mysteries of alien life. Following the exciting discovery, astronomers anticipate further revelations from the James Webb telescope that could reshape our understanding of life's potential diversity across the universe. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So it's a bit of a no-starter, but it is like a possible indicator, and they have found that on an exoplanet. And to my knowledge, that is an exoplanet that sits within the Goldilocks zone. So you know that sweet spot, close enough to a sun. To not scorch, so to not be frozen, but far enough away not to be scorched to nothing.
That's more science news than weird news.
It is, but it's weird if it becomes aliens, you know? It's, yeah, I can find another one if you want.
So what I want to know at this point is, does anybody listen to weird news, right? So if you're listening to this or watching this at this point, I want to know whether people shut off when we get to weird news or if you actually keep listening. Because we have no idea, right?
We shut off when we get to weird news, you know, sometimes. So it's.
I shut off when you talk.
Oh, that's why I sound so disjointed.
So do let us know if you enjoy the weird news segment. Because if no one's listening, we may as well ditch this bit and do the main episode. And
yeah.
This is we're a very small scale podcast. It's, free. It's run by us, written by us, edited by us. Like, we do everything ourselves. So we have no idea what people want to hear. So if you think weird news is stupid, you're probably not listening. So you won't be able to tell us.
Yeah, this is a good point.
I realized as I said that.
So if we do get any replies, even to the negative, we'll take it as good. People are always listening to weird news.
Yeah.
I mean, we might not ditch it completely. We might just do these extra things. You know, we might just have a mini episode where we just read weird news stories and take the piss out of them accordingly. If we do it that way, we might even actually read them before we post them.
Nah.
Probably not, though.
Anyway, AOB?
AOB.
You're in meetings more than I am. You must know AOB.
AOB. I've fried my brain recently, man.
There's
no AOB. There is no AOB apart from the socials, I guess.
Any other business?
I know. I caught on. It was like AOB. Oh fuck yeah! Literally in a meeting today. But
right.
In a few months it'll be a year of Wyrd Wessex.
That's when we get the Ouija board out.
That's when we get the Ouija board out.
Oh, we got some stuff coming.
Yeah.
Just you wait, guys.
we got ideas.
There's plenty to go on this one. We've got lots to talk about. There's a lot of weird.
Just you won't hear from us for a while, and then you found out that like Craig's like killed and eaten me or something. Started levitating and flown off with Bigfoot after he's had a wee.
Well, hopefully we're going to have someone on about Bigfoot soon.
This is true.
Listen, if you're listening, don't tell anybody, right? Because this is like hush hush. But we've got a Bigfoot expert from the US that wants to come on the podcast. But don't tell anyone because it's a secret. Shh.
It's not actually Bigfoot though. We tried.
Bigfoot wouldn't come on.
Too busy. Well, it was with the aliens. He was out of signal reach, you know.
It's actually Littlefoot. We've got Littlefoot coming on.
Isn't that the character from Land Before Time?
Yeah. That's who's coming on, guys.
Oh.
It's no biggie. We're not going to fan out. It's fine.
So that's about it from us. Thank you very much, as always, for listening. And Craig, tell them about the socials.
We are Wyrd Wessex, Wyrd Wessex on Instagram, TikTok. We're still on TikTok. We haven't been banned again yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. We are on Facebook as well. There is, and Andy doesn't know this. This is an exclusive. There is a Facebook group. Don't tell Andy. Right, hang on. Andy, don't listen. There's a Cult of the Weird Facebook group. So you should join it, but don't let Andy join.
Hey, what?
Yeah, and then we've obviously got our merch, which is on my Redbubble store, which has got the lovely Cernabus Giant. There's the censored and uncensored version, which you can get on t-shirts and I think, yeah, hoodies, stickers.
I need to get an
Notebooks.
uncensored. I need to get an uncensored. I need to get a censored one now, one that I can wear at work.
Why can't you wear the uncensored one at work?
Some teachers would frown upon it.
Really?
I reckon so. It's just our history.
Educational. Just put a big like masking tape crossover.
Literally sellotape a fig leaf to my
Yeah.
shirt.
Yeah.
And yeah, as always, if you have any supernatural stories you want to share with us, anything spooky that's happened to you, we'd love to hear it. You could come on the podcast or you can send it to us and we'll read it out. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, as always, stay weird.
Are you allowed to use that anymore? Because now that I know that another podcast uses that and has done for years, I feel like you ripped them off and he's more famous than us.
I've honestly never heard anyone else say that, so I don't care. No one listens to this bit anyway. Or do they? Comment below if you do.
There's Dan Schreiber, who does No Such Thing as a Fish, has a podcast called We Can Be Weirdos, and he ends with Stay Weird.
Yeah, but does he say at the end of that,
And me.